how do you get the General Assembly to pass a constitutional amendment in a state, as we've heard a couple of times already today, that does not have initiative or referendum? Should be easy. So we have a distinguished panel who are going to address that topic. And I think you're going to hear some very different perspectives on it. This is not something that we have rehearsed at all, so we're just going to kind of wing it. And introduce yourself. Thank you.
Kathay Feng is the executive director of California Common Cause. She also, thank you. She also heads up the national redistricting work for Common Cause. It's weird to talk about myself in third person, but I've been with Common Cause for about 12 years, and as I talked about before, I worked before with a civil rights organization servicing largely immigrant communities and Asian American communities, and the crossover issue when I came to Common Cause was really thinking about voting rights and making sure that the infrastructure of our government is set up in a way where everybody can be at the table. Right? Because I saw so many times how our voices were left out. So I'm excited to be here and talk about how we can fundamentally get at the inner workings, the plumbing of our democracy to make sure that it's running smoothly, because nobody wants a backup.
Khalif?
Yes. Okay. So my name is Khalif Ali. I am the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the Pittsburgh Foundation, which is a community foundation in Pittsburgh. So my background is in community organizing, and traditionally you don't see many community organizers in philanthropy. I don't know if we're going to do that. I don't think we do that too often. I took the position at the Pittsburgh Foundation because they have a commitment to what they refer to as assisting citizens, organizations in strengthening democracy. And for me, that is the overarching issue that we're really discussing here. It wasn't, they weren't so much concerned about particular issues or picking out issues, but they were instead interested in this idea, this concept that, in my mind, would help galvanize a lot of individuals and citizens who could assist us with a number of issues, including redistricting. So, I took the position, and I'm encouraged to be here with everyone, and I'm hoping that I can share a few things, maybe a few thoughts here and there about redistricting and how we can move things forward here. But I do want to say something. I don't do things necessarily because I know that it's 100% guaranteed that I will win. I do it because it's right and because it's what we need to do, and we have to exercise these rights in the context of a democracy. We can't just stop doing them because it seems like it's impossible. And I'm encouraged to see everyone here. I know the odds are against us, but we're still here, right? We want to continue to do the work. So thank you.
I am Michael Pollack. I'm with March on Harrisburg. March on Harrisburg is a nonpartisan, statewide, volunteer-driven group. We are working to heal our wounded democracy and to restore trust to the Republic. Right now we're pushing 3 bills, HB 722, SB 22, and then a gift ban bill, HB 39, and an automatic voter registration bill, HB 193. We lobby, we march, and we do nonviolent civil disobedience. Our first campaign from January through May, we lobbied 230 out of the 253 legislators on our bills. We then marched 105 miles from Philadelphia to Harrisburg, and we did 3 days of nonviolent civil disobedience in the state capitol, all aimed at our dear friend, Representative Metcalf. We're now gearing up for the 2.0 campaign. We've been lobbying all fall. We've been in the capitol almost every House session day. We are marching from Lancaster to Harrisburg, November 10th to the 12th, and then 2 days of rallies, November 13th and 14th. Our goal overall is to bring Pennsylvania from 45th in the Union. We're 45th out of the 50 states across 11 metrics of democracy. We're trying to get us up to the top 10 within a decade. We have a list of about 20 to 40 bills that we need to pass to get there, so we're doing it.
Albert?
He's going to need a mic.
Oh, he didn't need a mic.
Okay.
All right. How's this, volume-wise? Everybody good and back?
Okay, my name's Albert Eisenberg. I am a Republican-leaning digital strategist based out of Philadelphia. I previously have worked on LGBT non-discrimination, the only Republican working at the grassroots level in the state of Pennsylvania to get Republican grassroots voters on board with non-discrimination protections in the realm of public accommodation, housing, and employment. I did the same in Indiana under a then little-known governor named Mike Pence, trying to repair some damage he had done, made infamous by a religious freedom bill, which actually hurt gay and transgender people in the state. I also was the communications director of the Philadelphia Republican Party for the previous election cycle, so I'm used to attempting to try to deliver a fresh message to people in an uphill battle of ideas and get people really thinking about interesting issues. And that's what's appealing about gerrymandering to me. It's what I think of as a light of day issue. So if this bill is kept in the back rooms, and if this concept is kept in the back rooms, the insiders get to control it. But if we can put pressure on legislators who are, after all, even in lopsided districts, ultimately accountable to their voters, if there's enough pressure, we do get a bill passed. So, working on digital platforms specifically, working on a good message that appeals to the people of Pennsylvania, not just, the like-minded folks that we might have here, but people in Republican-leaning districts specifically across the state, to get them to support this type of bill with a message that works. That's really what interests me. I'll also say what's we're talking about a political problem that's also a social problem, and that we increasingly have siloed political conversations, which is really just people reaffirming their own sides, consuming their own media. And I want to do anything in my power as somebody who's relatively young coming into the political scene to try to bring the center back towards the center. And I think gerrymandering, although it looks like Republicans have benefited from it, technically as far as electoral representation we have, I think it's actually hurt my party quite a bit by creating an entire crop of people, our electeds, who are really only scared of primary challengers on their right. Same thing with the Democrats on the left. And really anything that can increase the number of competitive, whether it's state house or federal congressional districts, from the very limited scope of these intense, really high money races that are the bellwether swings and everything else is safe. Anything that can make increased competition of ideas and of votes in the state of Pennsylvania and otherwise, I think will help cure or move towards curing a lot of our political ills. So that was a long explanation, but that's why I'm here.
I still haven't figured out why he's able to project like that without a microphone, and I have to speak right into it.
It's a Republican secret.
Oh, it's a Republican secret, I'm told. Okay.
Correct.
So I'll just take a minute and reintroduce myself. Carroll introduced me earlier today, but I wanted to give you a little bit of my background as well. I started my professional career in the state Senate as counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee for the 1 year that the Democrats were still in control of the state Senate in 1979 and 1980. I just dated myself, unfortunately. I did that for 7 years. I then went to work for Governor Casey when he was elected in 1986, and I was his legislative counsel from the time that he came into office until he left in 1994. Then I practiced law for several years, 10 years. I came back in under the Rendell administration and was the Deputy Secretary for Unemployment Compensation through the recession and the post-recession years. And then I went to work for an insurance company. So I've had a lot of different experiences both in and outside of government, in the legislature, in the executive branch, and even as a lobbyist when I was practicing law. And so through all of that, I am still not cynical. I am not cynical to the point of inaction or belief that change cannot occur. I think I'm by nature an optimistic person, and particularly when I find an issue like this one that I believe in very deeply. So I think it's the intensity of all of our beliefs in the ability to change and to make this system work for democracy and for us. It really drives us and keeps us going in spite of what we already know are some pretty significant hurdles and obstacles that have been thrown up in our faces by the members of the General Assembly who say, for example, we will not meet with you, we cannot meet with you because there is a lawsuit pending. It is bogus. Now, there is no justification for refusal to meet with constituents because of the pendency of a lawsuit. Believing that to be true and to be almost incontrovertible, what do we do about that when we're given that excuse for not being willing to meet or not willing to have a hearing? So I'd be interested to hear if anyone has a perspective on that particular issue.
I can lean. That's awesome. One thing about being a nonpartisan organization, I can lean to the left or to the right. So I've spent the last 10 months of my life trying to get a meeting with Representative Metcalf. I just want to let you know kind of what we're thinking and how we go about doing this. So March on Harrisburg practices nonviolence. And nonviolence is not just an event or an action, but it's really more of an identity. It's a way of being in the world. And nonviolence falls into, there's three main points to it, three main pillars. The first pillar is truth. And with truth, what we're asserting is the truth that every human being has dignity, every human being has the right and the obligation to self-governance, to self-determination, to be able to participate in the decisions that govern our lives. And so we place that truth in front of Representative Metcalf and frankly in front of all 253 members as often as we can and as insistent as we can. And we do this through very creative ways. We do this through lobbying visits that resemble therapy sessions more than anything else. We really try to assert this truth and really make it clear that we are not living in a democracy right now. We were labeled a, quote, partly free democracy by the Electoral Integrity Report of 2016. I'm not quite sure what a partly free democracy means, but I think it means our voices don't really count. The second pillar of nonviolence is love. And love is incredibly hard, but it is incredibly necessary because the state legislature is a broken place. There is not much love. There is a whole lot of despair. There is a whole lot of hatred. There is a whole lot of mistrust. And so bringing an approach of love into that building itself is a very revolutionary concept. A quick story about just kind of what I mean by that. We met with I won't name names, a very powerful Democratic staffer in a very powerful Democratic office. And I met with him several times before, and at this meeting he said, when people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them that my job is to destroy democracy. And I don't like that, but I do it. And in 2021, when I get a chance to redraw the lines, I'm going to draw as many Republicans out as I possibly can, because I look across the aisle and I see crazy people. And I think that they're insane. And so I see it as my obligation to do that, even though I know I'm destroying democracy. So what I said to him was, I've heard this type of logic before. I've done some nonviolence work in the West Bank, and this is how Palestinians and Israelis over there talk about each other. Absolute lack of trust. You have to attack first, lest the other side attack you first. Never ever disarm, and just always be as aggressive as possible. And I said that when you're to be an American voter at this moment in time, to be a Pennsylvanian voter, is like being the unwanted child of two constantly divorcing parents. Right? They don't care about you. And they hate each other. And I said, you cannot govern from a place that's a combat zone. You cannot govern from a war zone. You cannot govern from a place where you can't even cooperate on issues that you agree on. And so I encouraged him to go and get some hummus with some Republican staffers and start to build some bridges. And I also let him know that we were going to do our best work to try to disarm him and the Republicans. The third pillar of nonviolence is soul. And what do I mean by soul? 80 years ago, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan was asked, following World War I, what is the most important verse in the Bible? And his answer was from the prophet Zechariah. Not by might, not by power, but by soul alone shall we all live in peace. And so we try to bring a soulful approach into the Capitol building. We try to really force the encounter with the power brokers. and have them see us from a place of love and of truth. And we believe that if people see each other on that level of common humanity, that our human reaction is to want to serve, to want to be responsible for each other. The 20th century philosopher Emmanuel Levinas wrote, "When you see the face of the other, you are ordered and ordained to service." And that's the kind of reaction that we try to get. So we are in Darryl Metcalf's face all the time with love and with truth and expecting that soulful response. And if you've ever seen any of our videos, he's very good at not looking us in the face, not looking us in the eye, because he knows that if he does, he's going to have a human response. So what we do to try to really knock down those doors and knock down those barriers that separate us, and I mean us as in separate citizen and state, separate Democrat and Republican, separate voter and elected representative, all of these separations. We just try to force the encounter again and again and again and again with love, with truth, and with soul. And we're having success. We're breaking through. I just want to add, I was just in Butler County for the past few days. Look forward to Mondays with Metcalf. It's going to start happening soon. We're going to force the encounter with him at the Burger King.
I'll start with just two ideas. So some of you have asked in California what was the political dynamics. It is the Democratic Party that controls in California. We have a Democratic governor. But when it comes to redistricting, it is just as ugly, right? Before we gave it to a citizens commission, the Democratic Party fought us tooth and nail. And you can imagine the equivalent to the NAACP leader here in California, her name is Alice Huffman, getting a phone call from Nancy Pelosi all the way on down with congressional members saying, "Alice, you need to back off." That's heavy pressure for somebody who knows that she's standing up for the right thing, but you're being told by friends that for a whole variety of reasons you need to back off. What I would say is that truth, love, soul, I totally agree. I think you also need to be strategic about building that unusual alliance, right? So who is the Daenerys, the Jon Snow, and the Lannisters in your community that is not in this room, that you need at that table? Who has a trust relationship with Darryl Metcalf? Who has a trust relationship with the Chamber of Commerce? So in our case, we had started to talk to SEIU. So remember, we're a blue state. And we actually found a few people in leadership, political director, who had looked at the math and said, you know what, you're right. This is insanity what we're doing. But congressional members were putting a lot of pressure on SEIU. Do not talk to these people. And so what we found was that we talked to folks and we got lists and we went down the line. Maybe I can't meet with you at the leadership level. Maybe I can't walk into the room where leadership is being scrutinized by people on high. But maybe I can meet with you one-on-one, or maybe I can find people at a lower level all throughout the state to talk to. In the Chamber of Commerce, we didn't start with LA Chamber of Commerce. We actually started with Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Black Chamber of Commerce. Who are the voices who got left out last time? I guarantee you, you will find there are women Republicans, there are LGBT people, there are Latino and African American, sometimes Republicans, right? Who will feel like, I got the short end of the stick. Your job is to find the people who were left out of the last redistricting cycle and represent them. Meet with them, talk to them, see if they can come on board. When we started to find those voices in California, they were our advanced team, right? They were the people who said, okay, I get it. Now let me go one level up. Let me talk to the LA Chamber of Commerce. Now let me talk to the California Chamber of Commerce. Because they're the best ambassadors. And so in a lot of ways, part of it is sort of figuring out, in this big room of 300, we all have connections. We all have a neighbor or somebody that we know, somebody that you happen to serve on the PTA with, or somebody that you go, to the local farmer's market and you see them all the time. This is the time to strike up that conversation. Reach out to the unusual partner, the person who maybe you don't always agree over Thanksgiving and politics aside. But this is a time to talk to them. So with SEIU, we eventually managed to triangulate. We found a lot of local leaders, and even though they ultimately voted, they voted to stay neutral, which was good enough for us, right? And then there were a lot of leaders at the local level who said, you know what, I heard what you had to say, I believe in it, I'm going to stand with you. Now the flip side of it in Pennsylvania is you've got to find people in business, you've got to find faith leaders, you've got to find people in minority communities who are not in this room right now that we can reach out to. The last piece that I'll just suggest is that I find that sometimes the unusual conversation is to look beyond leadership. So I know a lot of the focus right now is on Darryl Metcalf. But remember, you've got a lot of other legislators, and you should not assume that they all walk lockstep. And so part of it is, I mean, you've already built an amazing roster of sponsors of this bill. Part of it is to go to people who are not so likely and to say, so why did you come on board, and what can we do to figure out a strategy to get to other people? And that may be quiet conversations, right, that they can have with their colleagues. A lot of times it is the public face that gets them to have a conscience, but it's the private face that gives them the space to say, maybe you're right? They can't do that in public because they will be removed from the building. They will be punished heavily. So we need to find that inside-outside game to work on this strategically. In California, we looked up who the donors were to a lot of legislators. We started talking to their donors. Election season's right around the corner. We figured out when they were having house parties and times when they're raising money. And we found just a few people who every once in a while would ask, hey, where do you stand on this issue? And it was such a shock for legislators to go from hearing it at town halls to hearing it in small house parties, right? And that's when somebody like Darryl Metcalf says, oh, I guess this is an issue. I guess I do have to hear it, because they're hearing about it from different directions. And the key thing is for us to build out this coalition, to begin that conversation so that someone like Darryl is hearing it from lower ranking members, from the business community, from potential donors. Now he cannot afford to avoid that issue.
Just like briefly, I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and if a door shuts in your face, like Kathy's saying, be creative about how to get around them. Get a resolution passed in that state representative's hometown, supporting it. If you have somebody who you hear is going out on a limb and has told you, I'm bucking leadership, but I believe this is the right thing, put an op-ed or a bunch of LTEs in his local paper and say, thank you to Rep. Blank, you've really stood out on this. There are complications with committees, obviously, but the goal is to get to 50+1. So, carrot to the people that are doing the right thing, make sure you're generating positive feedback in their districts so they're going to benefit electorally from it, and then stick to the ones who are being obstinate, and the ones that are in the middle, invite them into the fold. And we should really be, however we can do that best is how we need to do that. And just because Darryl Metcalf won't meet with our organization doesn't mean there's not 100 other ways to influence how this goes.
And I'd just like to put in a little plug for our efforts on resolutions. I think we've been quite successful in that effort, which Jamie Mogul is involved with. Jamie?
Shout out.
Shout out to Jamie. Where are we up to? 125 municipal?
No, over 130 municipal resolutions in 12 counties.
That's great.
130 municipal resolutions in 12 counties. But guess what? We need more. We need more. A lot of them are concentrated in certain areas, and we need to do more. Resolutions, resolutions, resolutions. That's my first message.
It's a standoff. It's a mutually assured destruction scenario right now. The Democrats are holding the state legislative map, and the Republicans are holding the congressional map for the House of Representatives. And so the question is, how do you bring peace into a building? How do you disarm when both sides have a weapon pointed at the other? And that is not a simple question. Look around the world, there's conflicts that go on for centuries without end, and they're in situations of mutually assured destruction as well. So how do you do that? it really comes down to emboldening the rank and file membership on both sides of the aisle. It's common knowledge in the state capitol building that Speaker Turzai keeps what's called a naughty and nice list. And if you are on the wrong list, the next time around, you're going to get drawn out of your district. You'll get merged with somebody in the same party. You're not going to be there for that long. And the same list exists on the Democratic side as well. And there is collusion between the leadership on both sides when they draw the maps to protect the leadership. So even if the Republicans were to draw both maps, it's unlikely that Minority Leader Dermody would really fight that so hard, because he knows that he'll be safe, and so will the 10 friends that he puts on the list to keep safe. So it's really about emboldening the rank and file membership, who a lot of them feel threatened because a lot of them are on the naughty list, and they know it. I want to talk about one thing you were talking about, talking with his friends. We make it a point when we're in the Capitol to really talk with Representative Metcalfe's friends. And a lot of those conversations begin with really just getting yelled at for about 10 to 15 minutes or so. Metcalfe says a lot of things about us. There's a lot of rumors floating around. We're leftist anarchists, we're paid conservative political operatives. We're on every side of the spectrum and off the spectrum. And we go and we talk with his friends to really try to embolden them to take on the leadership, to take on Representative Metcalfe. A few weeks ago, he wasn't in the Capitol. He decided to stay home while the budget fight was going on. He wanted to avoid a possible vote on a tax increase, so he stayed home. And so we asked the question, what happens when the committee chairman goes missing? State business can't just stop. What's going to happen? So we figured it out, took all afternoon. We went to the parliamentarian's office a few times, went to Bradford's office a few times, and we learned what the procedure is. And then we went around to all of his friends on the committee and just told them, hey, there's a way around this guy. And we can call a special committee hearing tomorrow, turn the spigot on, get all of your bills through in one day, and as long as HB 722 and 39 are in there, let's do it. And they all said the same exact thing, which was, huh. No, he would kill me. I can't do that.
Yeah, right.
He's not beloved. The leadership in Harrisburg are not beloved. They're feared. And that is breakable. And if we show them some love and make them pay attention to us more than a lot of love. And really, I mean, Bradford said it earlier, break their will in a sense, break that connection that they have, that fear-based loyalty that they have to the chairman. You can really start almost a brewing revolution from within the rank and file. And that's really how you take on the membership. There is so much resentment in that building from the rank and file membership against the leadership. They are abused by them. They are not able to work in a cooperative, bipartisan manner for fear of retribution. The leadership can withhold campaign funds. The leadership can spend on your opposition. The leadership can draw you out of your district. The leadership can kick you off the committee. The leadership can make sure that your bills never see the light of day. There's a group of legislators in the state legislature who have been there for, however long they've been there for, and have been completely marginalized within the system. And they are really ready. I mean, it's brewing. The boiler is on it, and the pot's spilling over at this point. They are ready to just say, we're done with this. We're done of being bullied. We're done with just being kicked around by our leadership. And one more fact that we just learned yesterday, I got to give Frank some credit for this. Frank in the back. We were reading through the House rules and learned that if a majority of committee members sign on to a letter to the committee chair to consider a bill, the committee chair has to consider that bill. If we can get his friends on the committee to sign on to a letter, we can force the issue and really force the encounter. And they are ready. They really are ready to do this.
I have a flight to catch, but I will just leave with this piece. The naughty or nice list exists in every state. Your job is to find the naughty. Your job is to find people who maybe they know they're not going to get a district in 2021, and their political career might be ending. So they're feeling a little courageous in addition to being naughty. That's who you're looking for. Because those folks will feel like there's not a whole lot of political loss, and I can take a chance, maybe push for a vote, maybe write that letter or sign on to the letter, maybe become one of the co-sponsors. I am really intrigued by 100+ municipalities. I think in California, we started to really find those mayors, those city council members to be really instrumental, because they're also part of the naughty list. Too often those cities are cut into pieces and they're left, because people are chosen for who will succeed, a lot of people end up with the short end of the stick. So think about that naughty list in a really broad way. Those are your allies.
I was moderating. I was moderating a conversation on redistricting not too long ago in Pittsburgh, a GPNP's conference, and it was a room about this size, but it was only maybe not even half filled, maybe a third. You know, for me, that's not really that disappointing in a sense, because what it tells me is that two things: people are not very familiar with redistricting and gerrymandering, and if they are, they're not sure how it connects to their priorities. So I grew up in Pittsburgh. I grew up in neighborhoods, and I had the honor of organizing in these neighborhoods where this wasn't in the conversation. You know, we were talking about better education, public safety, home ownership, commerce in our neighborhoods. These were the things that made sense to people, because these were the things that they saw on a daily basis. These are the things that they experienced on a daily basis. And so even when we did talk about redistricting, we talked about it down the list. It was 12 or 13, right around with recycle bins and bird feeders in the backyard, right around in that area, because that was the relevance to people. And so what I'm saying is that a part of the work that we have to do is an education process. You know, what we do when we advocate with legislators is that we take data, we take research, and we develop a narrative that's compelling and that they can connect to, right? We have to do that with people too, right? So, you know, let me just say this, the only G in terms of gerrymandering that we talked about in my neighborhood was gentrification, which is totally different, right? Yeah. We don't talk about gerrymandering. So I'm saying to you that all of you in here are activists, right? I would consider you to be activists. There are so many more people who can be involved in this movement, and so many more people that can make an impact. I'm talking about a critical mass of individuals armed with the knowledge of what redistricting is, gerrymandering is, and this impact on our democracy. So, see, that's what really unites us. That's why Albert is here. I mean, because essentially we're not talking about a particular issue. We're talking about democracy, right? We're essentially talking about strengthening democracy, and that's why it's so easy for us to have this conversation. And why we can have, this is not a partisan issue. But my issue is really that we have to put the same amount of energy that we use towards advocating with legislators, with people. And have those people our greatest asset are the conversations that you have with your neighbors, with your colleagues at work, you know, at your church, at your synagogue, wherever. Those are the greatest conversations, but we don't have those conversations amongst each other as much as we should. You know, we're focused on this top-down scenario, and that's good. I mean, we need that too. I don't want to move away from that, but we can't forget about the conversations that we have in our neighborhoods and at our community centers. And you know, that's why I applaud Fair Districts, because they do this in a number of neighborhoods. But again, the people in my neighborhood don't know much about this. They don't know enough about it, and they could help. We could help. So just think about it in that context, because this is still democracy, and there are people who love democracy and want to participate, but they have to be able to see the connection, and we have to make that connection for them. We can't assume that they'll make it themselves.
I mentioned that I thought there were a couple of potential wild cards, and the other one, you know, we're focused on the calendar. We're focused on June 30th. We are trying our best to get the attention of the leaders of the General Assembly and the chairmen of the committees to move our bill forward. But another thing that's going on, which we're all aware of, is the lawsuit that was filed by the League of Women Voters and the 18 plaintiffs from from the 18 congressional districts. And the most recent development that you heard about, and it was discussed more in the breakout session, was the fact that there was an appeal filed or a petition filed in the state Supreme Court, similar to something called King's Bench, but not quite that. But basically, you're asking the Supreme Court to grab this case from the Commonwealth Court, take it directly into the Supreme Court, and deal with it on an expedited basis. And there's a lot of leeway, as I understand it, and Ben can correct me, or Thomas. I believe the Supreme Court has a lot of leeway in terms of, if they choose to take it, what they can do with it. But whatever that may be, whether they say Commonwealth Court, hold a hearing, we'll appoint a special master, the special master will put together some information for us, we'll have our own expedited hearing, whatever it is, they have different options available to them. But it is possible that they could issue an order in a fairly short time frame, possibly even by January. And that order would say that the current congressional districts, the maps, are unconstitutional for one reason or another, and have to be redrawn before the primary. So what that means to us, we're over there saying, Senate Bill 22, House Bill 722, get them moving, get them out of committee. The legislature might be dealing with a whole new set of maps for the current, redistricting that's now in effect, that they now have to redo. And so we may get even less attention, potentially, on our issue, or it may also be kind of a springboard to make something happen.
I think we have a political problem in this country. Sorry?
Amen.
Mike?
No, they said amen.
I heard some of both. Period. I think we have a political problem in this country. I think we have a political problem in this country where we have a lot of people that support, like, the difference between a means to an end and an end in and of itself. So you saw that with the Obama administration executive actions and the Trump administration executive actions, where the very same people that said, this isn't fair, this isn't how this should be done, you shouldn't be writing laws from the executive branch, for example, are now maybe supportive of Trump's executive actions, and the exact reverse is happening too. I think a Pennsylvania Supreme Court that is involved in the politicking of drawing legislative boundaries, in my opinion, coming as a conservative, that's a very, very easy way to poison the well and blow up any conservative support you're going to get. Because what we're saying as an organization is this should be a nonpartisan, independent process. And what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that's 5-2, extremely activist liberal, again in my opinion, would be saying in doing that is what a lot of Republicans suspect, which is actually this is just a way of getting retribution and balancing the scales. Now it's our turn to completely redraw these lines and mess everything up for Republicans because they should pay. Sort of that, weapons pointed at each other's heads, tribalism vibe that I hope most people here would not support, and certainly not what I support. So I think, it's pretty clear that legislative bounds are supposed to be drawn by our political representatives, our political branches of the state government, which is our legislature and our executive or governor. And so I hope, I'm not optimistic, but I hope that won't necessarily happen. That's kind of a unique take on it. I obviously support an end to gerrymandering and a more independent way of drawing these boundaries, but that's just kind of food for thought from a conservative perspective of what might be the result of that type of decision. I think it might sort of make people go into an even lower stage of bunker mentality, and we don't want to work with the other side, and that's my fear.
I want to agree. The job of the legislature is to legislate, the job of the executive branch is to execute those laws, and the job of the judiciary is to review those laws and make sure they're in accordance with the Constitution. This is a problem that the legislature needs to solve, and we can bypass it through the courts. We can bypass the legislature. But I really want to stress that this problem is much deeper than gerrymandering, and it's a problem of dysfunction within the legislature. This is the third straight year we haven't been able to pass a budget on time. Our credit rating was just downgraded a few weeks ago. We are unable to make decisions as a state, and that's the problem. It's a culture of corruption in Harrisburg that prevents reasonable argument, reasonable people from participating. And what we need to do really is fix the legislature and heal the legislature. And passing this bill will help do that. But it really does go much, much deeper than that. So I agree. I would rather see this be solved through the legislature itself so that they can actually work together on something of common concern and get it done.
Our political leaders, they're not just there in the state house to sit in the state house. Some of them are, a lot of them aren't. If you look at the 18th district where Tim Murphy is now gone, and if you look at Charlie Dent's district, you have a lot of people jumping into those races. Every single one of those people is an opportunity to approach somebody like Ryan McKenzie, who's jumping into Charlie Dent's race, or Kim Ward, who's a state senator, who's jumping into the PA 18th race, and say, hey, we know we've been talking, you're reasonable on this issue. If you can support us, we can cut an ad for you. We can say, we can, reward you, and that's a very bipartisan, and that's a huge help to somebody, not just going through a primary, but somebody, Charlie Dent's district, God, that's something that could really swing. So, anybody, those two examples indicate that a lot of the people, as you said, there's a lot of discontent in Harrisburg. There's also a lot of ambition and a lot of ego. So however you can figure out how to reward people who are willing to step out and bring them closer to us politically, that's the answer.
A good rule is that if they're not in the leadership and what they did professionally before they entered was not lobbying, there's a good chance they're resentful. And I want to tell one story of one representative. And that, sadly not as many people as you would like, but I'll name one name and tell one quick story. Representative Tom Mert. He's a Republican in the Willow Grove area. We've got a constituent. Excellent.
I'm also a constituent.
Excellent. I first approached Mert back in October 2016 about the gerrymandering bill that hadn't yet been introduced and the gift ban bill. And he said, if I sign my name onto these bills, they will go nowhere. They will get sandbagged, they will die, they will never see the light of day. And I said, why? And he said, well, I came in 2006, I was elected, and between the election and the first day of office, I got in the mail Philadelphia Eagles tickets for that weekend. The best possible tickets, sideline passes, free food, free parking, everything. By the way, completely legal. That's why we're working on a gift ban. And he said he knew who they were from. They were from a very wealthy developer in his district who had donated a lot of money to the party statewide. He took the tickets, he put them back in the envelope with a note that said, please make an appointment to see me in the office. That's where I conduct official business. Sent them back to the developer. This guy obviously, all right, so profiles and courage. This donor obviously did not like getting the cold shoulder. He felt he was entitled to privileged treatment just because of his wealth and his campaign contributions. And he stopped giving to the party statewide. This did not make the leadership happy. They lost a whale because of Mert. So every bill his name is on, they sandbag. He got into the legislature to work to help veterans with disabilities and adults with disabilities. He's had no progress in the last 11 years now that he's been there. So I first saw him and had this conversation in October. Saw him again in January, saw him again in February, saw him again in March, and every time just tried to encourage him and build a little bit of courage there. He signed on to the bills sometime around February or March. He finally took that step forward. And it's really about meeting with these people and talking with them. My senator, Art Haywood, he said when he first came in, he was confused because everybody who was making an appointment to see him in his Harrisburg office and in his district office were lobbyists. And he wondered, where are the constituents? Where are they? That's the question. Everybody in the state capitol is wondering. When we're there lobbying, we know how many volunteer citizen advocacy, good government groups are in the building. We know how many non-paid lobbyists are in the building, and the number is extremely small. Gotta go and see them. You gotta force the encounter. They need you. They need you to encourage them and give them some courage.